Welcome back to Book by Book as we continue our journey through the immense book of Isaiah, a book that is immense in both size and importance. Last week we talked about the dual purpose of Isaiah. The prophecies of Isaiah were given for two different purposes. One, to deliver a message of judgment to the people of Judah who no longer could see their own sin. And so in the midst of their hardness and their brokenness, God had sent judgment upon the people of Judah. And then second, also Isaiah was given to deliver hope to the people who would maintain their faith in God. And now this week we're going to put those two purposes into the real life, real world context of Isaiah in chapter 7 through 9 as we get a historical narrative in chapter 7. And this morning's lesson is really cool. If you've never had Isaiah 7, 8, and 9 preached together or taught as one unit, you're really going to love the conclusion of our study this morning. Isaiah chapter 7 takes place in the year 734 BC, a time period where nobody looks back on and says, oh, if it could only be like the good old days back in 734, because these were tough times for the people of Judah. Judah, if you remember, as we talked about in lesson 1, was a very small nation. And Judah was really ripe for the picking, especially when her two larger northern neighbors, Israel and Syria, decided to make a treaty and band together for the purpose of attacking Judah and then putting their own vassal king on top of Judah, with the idea being that the productivity of the nation of Judah could then flow north to Israel and Syria. And so Israel and Syria had already begun to attack the northern part of the nation of Judah. They were beginning to make their preparations to lay siege to the city of Jerusalem. And then on top of that, Judah also has to keep one eye focused on their far northern neighbor above Syria, and that is the ever-growing Assyrian Empire. And so right now, with her northern neighbors preparing to attack her, the nation of Judah, who is currently ruled at this time period by King Ahaz. Ahaz is known as one of the more wicked kings of the kings of Israel. As Judah is led by Ahaz, the nation has basically two options. Option number one is pick up the phone and give Assyria a call. Call the Assyrians and say, I will give you whatever you ask for. I will pull all of the riches out of my temples. I will pull all of the gold out of my treasury and send it to you if Assyria, you will attack Israel and Syria. So Judah could pay off Assyria to be its northern bodyguard, so to speak. Option number two for Judah is prepare your own defenses. Get ready for war, and then get down on your knees in prayer. Go before Yahweh and trust in His name and in your God to deliver you. And with that background, we find in Isaiah chapter 7, Isaiah walking up to King Ahaz with his son. Isaiah's son is named Shear-Jashub. Shear-Jashub means a remnant will return, both a name of fear and trepidation and also of hope. One, Judah's going to be beaten down until there's only a remnant, but then hope that there will be that remnant. You see, going in line perfectly with the overall theming of the book of Isaiah. So Isaiah shows up with his boy Shear-Jashub. The guy has the best names for kids. And he meets Ahaz at a very particular and very important location. He meets Ahaz at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field. Now, this was an extremely important location because that spot was where Jerusalem got its water. This is the source of life to be sustained in Jerusalem was the water, the conduit of the upper pool by the fuller's field. We believe most likely that that location today is the Gihon Spring, This spring is the source of clean water outside of the city of Jerusalem today. You can pay a few dollars to walk down into that spring and then to walk through Hezekiah's tunnel and then into Jerusalem. But the key during the days of Ahaz is that this spring is located outside the walls of the city. And during the days of Ahaz, one would need to pick up water from the spring, carry it all the way up to the city of Jerusalem, up a really steep and rocky path that is tough to make it up. And so for Ahaz, this spring and the resulting path up to Jerusalem, this is the most critical, the most vulnerable part of the city. You protect this spring or Jerusalem will die of thirst. And so Isaiah comes to Ahaz in Isaiah 7:3 in their most vulnerable location, the place that will be the hardest to defend, the place where Ahaz is probably going to look at, chewing his nails and saying, we better call the Assyrians to come and protect us because I don't know if we can defend this weak point where the spring is. Isaiah 7:3-9 says, Then the Lord said to Isaiah, Go out now to meet Ahaz, you and your son Shear-Jashub, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the fuller's field, and say to him, Take care and be calm. Have no fear, and do not be faint-hearted because of these two stubs of smoldering firebrands, on account of the fierce anger of Rezin and Aram and the son of Remaliah, because Aram with Ephraim and the son of Remaliah has planned evil against you, saying, Let us go up against Judah and terrorize it, and make for ourselves a breach in its wall, and set up the son of Tabal as king in the midst of it. Thus says the Lord God, It shall not come to pass. For the head of Aram is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. Now within another 65 years, Ephraim will be shattered, so that it is no longer a people. And the head of Ephraim is Samaria, and the head of Samaria is the son of Remaliah. If you will not believe, you surely shall not last. This narrative comes immediately right to the heart of the book of Isaiah. So God sends his prophet to the king of Jerusalem, to the place where he is most vulnerable, to the place where it is most difficult for him to trust in God. And Isaiah says, I promise that if you trust in the Lord, I will give you this guarantee that within 65 years from now, the capital cities of Syria and Israel, Damascus and Samaria, those cities won't even exist. They will be shattered. God will remove the threats away from Judah. They only need to do one thing: trust in the Lord. And then Isaiah goes even as far in this chapter to say, Ahaz, so you can know that you can trust me, ask me a sign. Ask any sign from the Lord, and he will deliver it to you. Ask God to call down fire from heaven. Ask him to multiply the bread of your dinner today. Let's turn this spring's water into wine. But Ahaz doesn't want confirmation of the Lord's promise, because Ahaz has already made up his mind that he does not want to trust in the name of the Lord. Instead, he wants to trust in the muscles of Assyria. So Isaiah and Ahaz answers with these. So then we have this response between God and the Lord in Isaiah 7:10-12. Then the Lord spoke again to Ahaz, saying, Ask a sign from the Lord for yourself from the Lord. Make it as deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz says, I will not ask, nor will I test the Lord. And since Ahaz won't ask for a promise to fulfill God's word, since he won't test God to see that God will be true, God delivers a prophecy to Ahaz and to all of Judah to prove that his word will be fulfilled. Isaiah 7:13 through 16 says, "Then he said, 'Listen now, O house of David. Is it too slight a thing for you to try the patience of men, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Immanuel. He will eat curds and honey at the time he knows enough to refuse evil and choose good. For before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken.'" So Isaiah makes a prophecy that during his days, a virgin will end up being pregnant. And we all know how virgin girls end up being pregnant. It's by no longer becoming virgins, being virgins. And the girl will have a child. And she will name him Immanuel, which means God is with us. God is with Judah. And before that baby, who turns into a boy, who turns into a young lad, before that boy is able to discern between good and evil, and I think we're talking about reaching that age for a bar mitzvah where a boy becomes a man before he reaches that age of accountability when it comes to good and evil in Jewish society about the age of 12. The kings of Israel and Syria will be dead. And the great thing from our perspective is that we can look at this prophecy and we don't need to wait a decade for it to be fulfilled. But before the time it would take for a young woman to find a man, to have relations, then to have a baby, and for that baby to grow up into a young boy and to have his bar mitzvah, the kings of both Israel and Syria were killed by the Assyrians. This prophecy of Immanuel and then the resulting future deaths of the kings of Israel and Syria was given in the year 734, as I initially mentioned. Now we know that Damascus was defeated and demolished by the Assyrians in the year 732, and their king was killed. And then Samaria, the Israelites in turn, will be defeated in the year 722, and their last king will be killed as well. So Isaiah's prophecy given in Isaiah chapter 7 is beautifully fulfilled by the word of the Lord. But I believe the prophecy of Immanuel was given to serve two purposes, just like the book of Isaiah has two purposes. One is judgment on Ahaz in Judah for unbelief. One is judgment on Israel and Samaria for all of their years of forsaking their Lord and the worship of Him in Jerusalem and following God's chosen king. And that judgment came forth. God fulfilled His word. The people of Judah should have trusted in the Lord, but they didn't. They chose instead to flee to the Assyrians, to trust in the might of this world, and the response to the disobedience of Judah and his age is then delivered to us in verses 17 through 25 of chapter 7. So Isaiah 7, verses 17 through 25, is in response to the unbelief of Ahaz when he says, "I'm not going to trust the Lord. I don't even want to see your signs, Isaiah." And so in verses 17 through 25, we see the judgment that will come to fruition as a result of the unbelief of Ahaz and Judah's failure to trust in their Lord. But God, I believe, not only was speaking to Isaiah and his generation, to Ahaz and his unbelief, but God was also providing hope through Immanuel. Hope for future generations. A hope that more than just a child was going to be born in the days of Isaiah. That there was going to be a coming son, a literal Immanuel, who will bring God with us. And one day a virgin will have a child, and she will be a virgin in the fullest extent of the word. And that young woman will bring the hope to the people of God. Hope to the remnant of God's people who still believe in the Lord, and the Lord in turn has not forgotten about them. So Isaiah 7 takes these dual purposes for Isaiah. Judgment to those who will not admit and see their sins. Hope for the remnant, and brings them together in a singular prophecy that is given at the all-important location, the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to a fuller's field. I say it's a crucial location because we're going to see it again later in the book in the next historical narrative. And so if you want to know what Isaiah is trying to communicate to the people of Judah in the past and to our people today, you got to look at these kids that are brought forward in Isaiah 7, 8, and 9. First, we had Shear-Jashub in verse 3. His son being a remnant will return. There will be a time of judgment now, but there will be hope for a future remnant who will return. Judgment, hope, this is what Isaiah is all about. And then there are going to be two more sons who will also deliver this message of judgment and hope to the people of Judah, to God's people during the age of the coming of Jesus Christ, and to the church today. And I believe that when we look at these two children that we're going to see first in Isaiah 8, the first son, the second son in Isaiah chapter 9, that those two sons are both the fulfillment of Immanuel. They are the fulfillment of Immanuel in Isaiah's day, and then the ultimate fulfillment of Isaiah, of Immanuel, in the coming of Jesus Christ. Well, the first fulfillment of Immanuel, the first Immanuel son, shows up in Isaiah chapter 8, which is the prophecy that God will soon judge the enemies of Judah. God will judge Israel, God will judge Syria. Ultimately, God will judge Judah because of her unbelief, but God will judge Israel and Syria before the time takes place when a virgin could lie with a man, have a baby, and then that baby could grow up and have his first bar mitzvah. And so that child that we see in Isaiah chapter 8 is the child who comes with my favorite name in the Bible. And we see it in Isaiah chapter 8, verses 1 through 3. Then the Lord said to me, "Take for yourself a large tablet and write on it in ordinary letters. Swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. And I will take to myself faithful witnesses for testimony, Uriah the priest and Zechariah the son of Jeroboam." So I approached the prophetess, and she conceived and gave birth to a son. And then the Lord said to me, "Name him Maher Shalal Hash Baez." And if you want a little point of trivia here this morning, Maher Shalal Hash Baez is the longest word in the Bible. And if anyone needs a suggestion for a baby name, you're having a little boy, I would really strongly suggest that you use the name Maher Shalal Hash Baez. We use a lot of biblical names today, but Maher is being neglected far too much. Well, the name of this boy who comes to us in Isaiah chapter 8, whose timing of his birth and then his eventual growing into being a man fits with the first fulfillment of the prophecy of Immanuel. Maher Shalal Hash Baez's name means swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. And what this name means is that the wealth, the booty of Israel and Syria, their wealth will be taken away from their nations, and it will happen swiftly. It will happen quickly. So all of Isaiah chapter 8 is an expansion of the prophecy given in chapter 7 of the upcoming defeat by the Assyrians of the lands of Syria, Israel, and I will also add Judah. Now, Judah will not be entirely conquered and exiled as Israel and Syria will be, but at the same time, Judah will be beaten down. City after city, village after village in Judah will be conquered. All of Assyria, all of Jerusalem will basically be surrounded by the Assyrian troops. before God's eventual deliverance of Judah during the days of Hezekiah. So this chapter is an elaboration of the first prophecy of Immanuel. Immanuel, on the one hand, is the same as Maher Shalal Hash Baez. And that is, God will be with his people in the destruction of Israel and Syria as their power, their riches, their wealth are taken away by the Assyrians. And so that is what we see in Isaiah chapter 8 is the first initial fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 7. And I don't really want to go into detail in a lot of the rest of that chapter because it's more of just the judgment that will be brought upon those nations. I want to save our time for one of our favorite passages in all the Bible, and that is Isaiah 9. One of those sections we love to read during the Christmas season. Isaiah 8 is very dark fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 7. We see hints of that darkness in the beginning of Isaiah 9, as Isaiah needs to talk about the light of this 9th chapter coming up during a time of gloom, a time of anguish for Zebulun and Naphtali. And we need a little geography lesson. The tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali are the two most northern tribes in Israel. So they would have been the first tribes conquered and taken over by the Assyrians when they marched in during the days of Isaiah. But Isaiah 9 comes to say that all is not lost, even for Zebulun and Naphtali. Isaiah's message of hope even includes the area where it looks like things are the most hopeless. The doom and gloom of Maher Shalal Hash Baez in chapter 8 is replaced by the child of hope in Isaiah 9. Listen now as I read a passage that we all know so very well. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There will be no end to the increase of his government of peace on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness from then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. The Immanuel of Isaiah 7 was first Maher Shalal Hash Baez in Isaiah chapter 8, and now he is the child in Isaiah chapter 9. The child who we know as the Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Eternal Father, and the Prince of Peace. The one who will rule an eternal kingdom of peace. And so what we see is that Immanuel was not only immediately fulfilled in a birth in Isaiah's day, but there was also looking forward to a future child who will be so miraculous, who will be so divine. He can only come by a virgin birth where the Son of God comes to dwell with man. Isaiah 8 is all about the judgment for those who are unable to see their sin problem. Isaiah chapter 9 is all about giving hope to those who will maintain their faith in the Lord. And it just fits so perfectly with the overall message of Isaiah. When we look at the message that Isaiah is giving to the nation of Judah, and then he gives this powerful Immanuel prophecy, we should expect a dual fulfillment. We should expect a son to come on the one hand that can point toward judgment, and on the other hand that can point toward hope. And that is exactly what we see in Isaiah 8 and Isaiah chapter 9. We can't fully understand the significance of the Immanuel in Isaiah 9 without understanding what God did back in the days of Ahaz and back in the days of Isaiah. For God to be able to come to his people 700 years before the birth of Jesus, and give them that little seedling, that little initial seed of hope that their Messiah is coming, and then for God to say, this is how you will know He's coming. This is how you can prove me. And that is when it looks like all hope for Judah is lost because Israel and Syria are bearing down upon them. I will remove them. So the Lord, through His prophet Isaiah, wanted to give His people a way to anticipate the child who will bring the eternal kingdom of justice and righteousness. And then the way that we can look forward to that kingdom is by looking for the one of the virgin birth. Looking forward to Immanuel coming to earth. Looking for the child. So God gives, in my opinion, what is the most perfect of prophecies. It is so tough to have hope in a prophecy when the fulfillment is going to be 730 years down the road. So what does God do? God gives a prophecy where there is an immediate fulfillment right in the next 10 years of Isaiah's time period. And I got to say, if you're looking for a really good prophecy, I want something that's not going to be fulfilled in 5 months that anybody could guess at. I want a good decade of space in between so that I can be sure that what was said came to fruition in a farther time period than you could make just by simply reading the tea leaves. And that's what God did with the birth of Maher Shalal Hash Baez and the defeat of Israel and Syria. Two nations that were both stronger, both bigger, both wealthier, both larger than Judah. And God brought the deliverance. And why did God bring that deliverance? So that He could give hope to the faithful that one day the second Immanuel would come. The Immanuel who is the child. So the next time that you head down to Isaiah chapter 9 during the Christmas season and we sing the Messiah, we rejoice over all these titles for Jesus, don't forget about the context of the 2 chapters that come before. Don't forget about how miraculous it was that 730 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, God was already planting the seed. God was already bringing forward the signs so that His people could hope in Him. And remember, when you're reading through Isaiah, we need to always be looking at it through this grid of the purpose, and that is to give judgment to people who are hard-hearted, to people who will not listen no matter what Isaiah says, but then will also give hope to those who will keep their faith in the Lord. And that is the purpose of Isaiah brought into the practice of the historical context of the book.